Today our guest is Marisa Streit, the CEO of PragerU. Marisa Streit is a Los Angeles native. She moved to Israel at a young age where she completed her primary education and served in the IDF in the prestigious military intelligence unit 8200. She returned to LA where she earned her BA in Business and Economics from UCLA and her master's degree in nonprofit management from American Jewish University. Marisa is an innovative leader in the conservative movement. She joined PragerU in 2011, where she was personally selected by the co-founders, best-selling author, speaker, radio host Dennis Prager, and esteemed film TV veteran Alan Estrin, to elevate the organization as its first CEO. Under Marisa's dynamic leadership, PragerU has grown quickly into one of the most respected go-to resources for what has made America and the West the source of so much liberty and wealth. Her professional experience has enabled PragerU to more than double its audience each year, making it one of the fastest growing conservative organizations in the world with 4 billion overall viewers. Marisa has scaled the organization from a small startup company, which she originally operated from her home, to a growing 50 employees nationally. She has led fundraising efforts and tripled revenues from 6 million to 25 plus million in just a few years. Among her many accomplishments at the firm, she has spearheaded the popular Candace Owens Show podcast, which quickly became the #1 most downloaded educational podcast on the App Store. We love that show. We're addicted to it. Welcome, Marisa. We are so happy to have you here. It's a big honor to have somebody of your caliber sit with the Yentas and discuss everything that we're going to discuss today.
Well,
Hi, Marisa. Welcome. It's so great to have you here. Welcome to Yentas in the City. It's a pleasure to have you on our show. It's nice to have a fellow UCLA Bruin on our show today. A little Yenta trivia for you. I bet you didn't know that this Yenta was the news director at UCLA for their radio station, KLA Radio. And look where I ended up, on Yentas in the City.
That's great.
Marisa, since you are the CEO of PragerU and you are involved in politics, we're going to ask you some politically charged questions. I'd like to ask you about the current state of the election and what you think are Donald Trump's realistic chances of pulling a victory. Currently, he's down approximately in Arizona by 14,000, in Pennsylvania by 45,000, Michigan by 14,000, Wisconsin by 10,000, Nevada by 35,000, and in Georgia, they're going to recount. Do you think the amount of fraud is as rampant as the Trump team says it is, and can he overcome these deficits?
You know what, honestly, I wish I had a crystal ball into the future, but I think nobody really knows the answer to that question. Do I think that there is fraud? I do believe that there is fraud. We anticipate that there's going to be fraud because the moment they changed the terms and had mail-in ballots become a new thing, it just opened an entire opportunity for dead people to vote and all kinds of additional issues. It was pretty obvious that there was going to be some fraud, and obviously this is a very high stakes election. So it's not going to be shocking to hear that there are all these fraudulent things. Whether it's enough numbers to completely change the election, or whether there is enough of an appetite amongst the bureaucrats in our government to actually fight the fraud, I don't know. I hope so, but I really honestly just don't know the answer.
It's interesting.
I don't have any secret information that you all don't have.
Yeah, it's interesting you say dead people are voting and service dogs are voting, I hear.
Right, I saw that video.
You saw that, I'm sure.
Yeah. You know, it's obviously deeply concerning. And I think that there is a certain segment of our population that ended up really disliking Donald Trump so much that they have kind of had this attitude where the end justifies the means. And so if it means doing things that are either unethical or hurtful or, just outright evil and bad because they dislike Donald Trump so much, they were willing to go down that route in doing it. And so I think everybody that's listening to this, and I'm sure all of you as well, can think of multiple examples of how people just hated Donald Trump so much that it caused them to have certain behavior that otherwise they would never behave that way. But they just, they call it the Trump derangement syndrome. So I wouldn't be surprised that people would do things that otherwise they wouldn't do, because there was just so much of this momentum that was growing with disliking, the
Trump.
president.
Wow.
Yeah.
Marisa, we currently live in Los Angeles. I live in Los Angeles, California, and I'm sure you lived in California. Um, and have witnessed like a frog being cooked alive, really, how the quality of life in Los Angeles has deteriorated systematically over the last 30 years. Los Angeles used to be a haven, a great place to live. Now it is filled with homelessness, poverty, a huge gap between rich and poor, with home prices being skyrocketed and unaffordable to the average working couples or just people in general. What do you think will be the outlook for California in the next 10 to 15 years? And do you think it will turn around, or do you think it will continue to deteriorate? And what do you expect? What is your vision of Los Angeles in 2035, let's say?
Honestly, it's sad, because anybody that lives here just can look out their window and see how much things have changed in the last even 2 years or even 1 year. And it's not just COVID, even before COVID. And so one does not even have to want to look 10 years down the line. I think even within the next 3 years, if things continue to go this route, it's going to get severely worse. We see many of the PragerU donors have taken their businesses and moved out of California. You're seeing a lot of wealth moving out of California. Much of it is going to Nashville and Florida. Full disclosure, PragerU is considering also a move within the next few years.
Oh, wow.
And so I think that when you have policies that just treat business owners like they're the enemy of the state, and treat landlords like they're the enemy of the state, then ultimately people who can afford will pack up and leave. And those who cannot afford, sadly, are going to be stuck here. And so, or it's not a good situation. I wish I could give something more optimistic about it, but unless there is a serious change in the way this state is governed, people are just going to run away. So, we obviously have an immigration issue where many immigrants are moving in. So you're going to still see large numbers of people living in California, but you're also going to see large numbers of successful business owners, people with wealth, leaving California. And many celebrities, ironically, all these celebrities that keep advocating for all of these policies so they sound so politically correct and so woke and so popular and all of that, they are going and buying second homes in Idaho and in Nashville, Austin, Texas. They're living half of the year there. They can afford to do so, but normal people that can't afford to live in two states and fly in their private jets back and forth are going to be stuck here because they can't afford to live the woke mentality that is just ruining our state.
Yeah, it's so sad. My parents own all these properties. Thank God that they paid them off. But if they had a mortgage on it, they would declare bankruptcy, because a lot of the tenants are not paying. They didn't give any homeowners or building owners you can delay your mortgage, but thank God they didn't have a mortgage on it. But it's really sad. They would be in their 80s and they would have to declare bankruptcy because they wouldn't be able to afford it. And if they didn't have savings, people owe them thousands of dollars that they will not be able to collect. And instead of the state picking it up and helping these people, they basically said, oh, you worked hard and you did all this. You should pick up the tab for the state. It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's absolutely horrible.
Policies that make no sense, with the effort of trying to sound, like I said, woke or PC. You got to have this number of women on a board. You got to have this number of minorities on a certain board. I mean, it's ridiculous. Look, I'm a woman, so it might not work for me to say this, but I rather be placed on a board or placed as a CEO of a company because of my merit, not because of my
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I always say the balance sheet doesn't care about what my gender is, right? At the end of the day, I got to pay those bills. I got to make sure that my staff gets their salaries. I got to make sure that we can pay the rent. It has nothing to do whether I'm a female or a male. And so now that there are these new laws that are forcing corporations in California to have this diversity quota, it is going to be untenable. It's hard enough to find amazing talent and one that has the specific niche and experience and all of that. And like, if you go to a brain surgeon, do you really care what the color of that brain surgeon's skin is? No, you want them to be
Right.
the best brain surgeon ever. And I think that's just how you have to treat any line of work, right? You just let people who do a great job, do their great work and pay people and hire people based on their merit. And so once you're moving away from equal opportunity and you only focus on equal results, then you already eliminate the equal opportunity. There is no longer equal opportunity if everybody has to land at the same place. And so it's really disruptive. I mean, you see this in Hollywood now. You know, if your film is nominated for an Oscar, you cannot have a film without having the main characters represent every single one of the minority
We saw
groups.
that. Yeah, we saw that. In order
Right,
to
they're changing
in
it
order
soon.
to submit a film, it has to meet certain criteria of having a certain amount of ethnicities represented in the film and whatnot. Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of this stuff comes out of, you talk about California, a lot of these terrible ideas come out of California and New York. And really, it ends up hurting those who they pretend that they're trying to help. And at the end of the day, it just hurts everybody rather than let people feel super energized and super charismatic and work super hard so that they can win their spot wherever it is. Now we're regressing and going backwards. And I think it's going to have an impact. People used to say when I started PragerU in 2011, a lot of my friends would say to me, "Wow, Marissa, you're so political. I'm not that political. I'm not that into it." And I said, I wasn't that political either. Really, my background was education. I was an educator, but I saw that it was coming. That we'll get to a point in our life where politics is not just going to be this thing on television. And if we don't stop it from ballooning, it's going to become part of every part of our life. And so over the last 2 years, and especially over the last year, you see so many people who had these political awakenings. So many more people voted. And so why did they have this political awakening? Is because eventually those policies will hit you at home, right? Eventually it's going to have an impact on what your kids are learning in school. Eventually it's going to have an impact on whether you can even go to school. So all of these things are, incredibly important. And hopefully there's going to be a giant awakening in California where people are going to say, we want our freedom back.
If
I
not,
just hope it's
people
not
are
going to
just
be
going to
too
leave.
late.
Or they're going to vote with their feet.
Yeah,
Right.
they're going to leave. Like Ben Shapiro picked up and left his whole show and
Yeah, Ben
the
Shapiro.
same PragerU.
We have a staff of 60 employees. We're not a massive company, but we're certainly growing. And if they're going to continue making it impossible to run a business out of here, then we'll leave too. And you know what? Many of the Silicon Valley employees now don't even live in San Francisco anymore because it's so horrible to live there. You walk outside, it's homeless and needles and
Yeah.
Right.
people are defecating in the streets. And
Oh.
so people are going and living in places like Austin and doing or Idaho and doing remote work. So those are the people who can afford to just pack up and leave or work virtually. But what about the people who can't work virtually or cannot afford to live in 2 different homes because they can't afford to buy 2 different homes and fly back and forth? At the end of the day, they're the ones who are gonna get hit and hurt. And so, sadly, I'm not very optimistic about California.
Yeah.
Oh,
I wanted to ask you, shifting back towards the election, are you encouraged by any of the results of this election? Meaning, do you think that the increase in minority voting for Trump is a real trend that is something the Republicans can build on? Or do you think this was just a one-time election and minorities will go back to voting for the Democratic Party? And of course, can you name at least one positive development for the Republicans in this election?
I can name like 10 positive developments for this last election, in my opinion. And I'm not speaking on behalf of PragerU. It's me personally. I think number one, the energy that we have all seen, that the base has had, is unbelievable. And I think, especially on the conservative side, these are people who really studied the matter, because they were placed, especially if they live in California, you're constantly placed on the defense. You're constantly having to explain why it is that you support these policies, because everybody's going to attack you. And that has caused conservatives in coastal states to become incredibly educated about topics. That's why PragerU has grown so much, because it wasn't just who you're voting for, but people would say, why, how dare you? And so an educated base is a very powerful base. Education is incredibly powerful, and I think that is long lasting. I also think with regards to minorities, I think people have realized the truth that conservatism is really the ideology that helps the middle class more than the upper class, where the media has tried to basically lie to us all these years, saying that the Democrats protect the poor, where in fact the Democrats actually use the poor.
Yep.
And certainly we've seen how the Democrats have used minorities to try to propagate their ideology. So we have seen so many people who've done a complete 180. And we see that also, with their votes, and how much more encouraged they are to support a conservative platform. So I don't think they're going to go back on that, because I think many of them have had eye-opening moments, and so I think that is very encouraging. We also see that with a lot of young people. A lot of young people have experienced cancel culture. I say that I do think the left has overplayed their hand, and many people are sick of being silent. There was a real silence amongst conservatives, especially if you were young. You would go to university with your head down and be afraid to speak out. And I think over the last few months, there have been more signs that conservative youth is encouraged. Like organizations like Turning Point USA, Prager Force, and many other organizations have given a home for libertarians and conservatives to get involved and be more educated. I think it's going to take time as our organizations grow and really build off the momentum we've built. And I think whether you love Donald Trump or you don't love Donald Trump, and everybody may have criticism about whether his rhetoric is the right rhetoric, or his Twitter account should be open or not open. At the end of the day, I think he paved the way for conservatives
Absolutely.
to shake up and just do better. We conservatives have become complacent. They didn't know how to reach minorities. They didn't know how to reach the youth. And Donald Trump did something very, very big in shaking everybody up and getting everybody to think about things differently, including conservatives, to take the responsibility to address and educate the issues and energize the base. Whether he makes it into the promised land and gets 4 more years, I don't know.
He will have reshaped the party forever. He will have reshaped the party.
He reshaped our country forever. Maybe in some ways he's like Moses. He brought us to the promised land. He may not get in. Maybe he will get in. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But at the very least, what he's already done has been transformative in a way that is I think very, very positive for the conservative movement. He really shook people up and woke people up. And you cannot silence this group. There's 70 million people that will not be silenced anymore. And that is a very powerful thing.
Wow. Marisa, in October of 2017, PragerU filed a federal lawsuit against Google, claiming that 37 of its videos, some of the places I read, it said 37 videos, some said 200 videos. It's 200? It's more than 37?
It's more, yeah.
Were unfairly demonetized or flagged, so they could only be viewed with restricted mode filtering. And for a viewer, that means limited views based on certain characteristics, including the age of the viewers. PragerU claimed that Google's action violated the First Amendment and asserted YouTube was a public forum. In March 2018, the case was dismissed and US district judge ruled that because Google was a private company, which I find it's crazy, because how can you call Google not a public forum? Then PragerU failed to show that it has been infringed its free speech rights. In February 2020, this ruling was upheld again by the US Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal. Can you elaborate on the lawsuit and what was the thought process? Because I thought it was amazing, because it happens all the time on social media. Just like you said, certain videos on the conservative side are taken out, and on the other side, a lot of videos, even though they could be offensive, are not being pulled down. What was your thought process? Because it's very costly to file such a lawsuit. Why did you guys decide to file the lawsuit as well? Like what?
Okay, so we decided to file the lawsuit because we believe that justice and the truth matters. And whether part of what PragerU does is to bring justice and truth to the people. And whether we would win the lawsuit or not win the lawsuit, people need to know what's happening. Now, some people may say YouTube is a private company and it has the right to take down content they don't like. Maybe they'll say that. But think about just that question in itself. Google purports that you can just go on Google and Google something, right? Think about that language that we use. Let me Google something. It comes with this assumption that all of the information is going to be out there. They claim that it's a free forum to exchange ideas where you can find all information out there. The most important thing that PragerU did in this lawsuit, beyond trying to seek justice, is to also share the truth with the world, with our country and with the world. And that is, big tech has an agenda and they are willing to go to no ends to support the agenda. And that is to basically control what information is out there. Whether we win the lawsuit or not, the lawsuit, they do admit that they do want to control what information is out there. Now think about that, what that feels like to you as a consumer. Forget about PragerU, okay? Whether you want the videos up there or not. The fact that there are big tech companies, YouTube, Facebook, and you know the other major social media, Twitters, the kind of influence they have on communication, right? Where does everybody get their information? It's all on those channels which I mentioned, right? Most people, 99.9% of people get their information through these social media platforms. For them to have the right to just take down information simply because they don't like it without having to justify a reason and just say, we just don't like it because we said so and therefore it will be taken down, and still make a public claim that they're all about freedom of information. It is essentially a lie. Okay, if they came out and said, look, we're a publisher and we're going to publish content that we like. There's content that we don't like and don't agree with, and it's out there. Somebody else can go publish it, but we won't publish content. The New York Times has the right to publish their content, okay? But they don't claim to be a fair and balanced public forum where anybody can go on, and therefore they don't have the protection of the Consumer Decency, the Communication Decency Act. The CDA, Section 230 of the CDA gives them a protection where you cannot file a lawsuit against them or sue them for having information out there that is incorrect, or they're not liable for the content that's on their site, right? YouTube and Facebook. But a publisher is liable for it. So they get to eat the cake and have it too. Still claim to the public that it's a freedom, all freedom of information, everything's out there. But then when there's information they don't like, they can take it down. And to me, that is a very scary thing, because when we give power to people that we don't even know who they are, we don't even know what their agenda is, we don't know who's paying them off, we don't know who is motivating them to take things on and off, it's a very scary thing. At least with our public officials, to some degree, we at least vote for them and we know who they are to some degree. Obviously, there is a whole segment in government of bureaucrats that never leave, and we don't exactly know everything, but with big tech, I mean, they just get to do whatever they want. They get to wear their White House hats and decide what is true and what isn't true. And I think that it just leaves us in a place where, you know, people talk about Russia and Pravda and how their news is completely controlled by the government. And we're like, oh my God, we're so much freer. Are we? Are we so much
I
freer?
was just going to say dictators before you brought up that.
You know, how are we so much freer if, you know, government, you know, the government and the big tech can just get together and say, let's just not inform people of this or that. Let's just manipulate the public and tell them that this is in fact the case. How are we free if we're fed a certain set of information that may or may not be true? And of course, something like this will have impact on elections. So, you know, that ties into the first question you asked me. How are we going to have free and fair elections in America if there isn't free and fair communication?
Yep.
I want to ask you, did you file the lawsuit with Stand With Us, or was it separate lawsuits? Because I think Stand With Us also, I thought they also had a lawsuit against YouTube.
Love Stand With Us, but I'm unaware of their lawsuit.
Oh, okay.
To Roz Rothstein, hope
Yes.
she's doing amazing work. But
Yes.
yeah, I don't know about the lawsuit. So no, we filed independently, and we were probably one of the first, but I know many followed, including folks in the LGBT community who's got censored as well. So you know, this is not necessarily a conservative issue. It's multi-pronged, faced. You know, it's an issue that comes from multiple ideologies.
Uh-huh. Marissa, I wanted to go back to politics, and I wanted to ask you our last politically charged question. Why do you think African Americans continue to vote Democrat, especially in Democrat-controlled areas such as Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York City, even though the education, crime rate, and homelessness in these cities has been deteriorating for decades? What do you think we can do, or what can be done to win the American citizens over to another way of thinking and break their reliance on the Democratic Party, which some may say has taken their vote for granted?
I think that you said two key important words. One is controlled and the other is education. And I think the lack of education that is provided to these communities is what's leading them to come up with certain ideas. You know, I'll share one story that broke my heart. I encountered this past summer. There's a young guy. His name was Amir. He's 22 years old, and I met him when he joined Prager Force. Before he joined Prager Force, he was an incredibly sad person. He thought, looking back, he grew up in Chicago, and he would walk the streets thinking that if a white cop would show up, he'd get shot and killed. And so every day, Amir would walk around in fear, shackled by this fear that he'd be killed. And the fear was really unjustified. To put that kind of fear in these children for no reason, no real solid reason, is what is holding many people back. If you're told every day of your life that you're going to be hunted, that you're not going to be able to do well, that society is stacked against you, that the odds are stacked against you, that nobody's going to want to hire you, that nobody's going to be able to support you, and you have no hope. When you hear that every single day of your life, it is like putting a handcuff and basically handcuffing you to the door. And so Amir broke free of that handcuff when he realized that it was not true. It wasn't the case. He got pulled over a few times by white cops, and actually they were incredibly nice to him. And so he started asking himself, wait a second, why didn't they shoot and kill me? I thought I should be dead if I get pulled over. And then there was a person who mentored him and gave him a job and treated him like a person without looking at his color. And he said, well, you know, you're treating me like a regular person, and I'm doing really well. That my color doesn't matter to you? And then the business owner said, no, it doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is your performance, and your performance is stellar. And so, you know, good for you, keep going. And so he became a really hard worker, and he started questioning what he was taught as a child. And so if we continue to tell children that they cannot do things and that society is stacked against them, then they will not. And if they are told that they are living the American dream and the American experiment is all about trying hard, working hard, showing up, believing in yourself, and not thinking that one should treat you differently, but just give everybody an equal opportunity to go at it, I think that will completely change these people's trajectory. But what happens is our own education system has incredible left-wing bias, and they are continuing to teach kids, really, in many cases, they teach them lies that actually hurt them. So while they're taught these lies in this very controlled environment, then they're going to continue believing what they're told. They're not exposed to other ideas. That's why I think, this is why when we discovered Candace Owens a few years ago, and she so well articulated this particular issue, we just wanted to strap a rocket to her message, because anybody that is touched by Candace Owens and takes on her philosophy immediately becomes like that Amir Odin that I described.
We're huge fans, huge. At the American.
It's amazing. It's like she touches them with this information and they become successful overnight. It's crazy, but that is the case. I mean, you gotta like take those shackles off. But the Democrats don't want those shackles to be off. They want to keep them low. They want to keep them as victims. They want to keep them controlled. As long as people are victimized, as long as they're victims, the best way to control a person is to tell them that they're a victim. That's how you manipulate a person. You weaken them, you tell them they can't, and then you come in and say, let me take charge of you, and then you will be able to, only if I take charge of you. And essentially, that's what they do. They weaken people, they weaken these minority groups, they tell them they cannot do it, and then they tell them the only way you can do it if you rely on us, and you let us handle everything for you. Imagine their message to these young people was, you can do it. You are incredibly powerful. You're incredibly successful. America is the greatest country. If there's anywhere you'll be successful, it will be in America. And that is the truth. That's why everybody wants to come here. So if they heard a message like what Candace says, then they will, remove those shackles off and become incredible. But that's not what they want. They want control.
Not just that, I also think that the minute with an African-American president, you can no longer make those claims, because if he got to be a president, how can you say we cannot do it? He hit the ceiling, and now we have it. And now if Biden ends up staying in office, if he is in office, he's going to take over office, we have a woman, African-American. So hopefully, anything.
There is no utopia. There's always going to be racism. There's always going to be anti-Semitism. There are always going to be assholes. There are always going to be, people who, I don't know, look at women in a whatever way, a demeaning way. There's always going to be that. But there's no way to eliminate evil. It's part of human nature. However, and all of these things which I mentioned are evil. It's evil to be racist. It's evil to be an anti-Semite. It's evil to treat people, wrongfully, right? But there is no way to completely eliminate it. But to claim that America is a racist country that doesn't give equal opportunities to women and minorities, I mean, it's just an outright lie, and it actually only hurts us.
All right. Marisa is an Israeli. When I was reading your bio, one of the things that stood out to me amongst all your accomplishments and accolades was your service in the prestigious Unit 8200 of the IDF. For our viewers that are not familiar with Unit 8200, it's a unit that is responsible for collecting signal intelligence and code decryption. According to the Director of Military Sciences at the Royal United Services Institute, Unit 8200 is probably the foremost technical intelligence agency in the world and stands on par with NSA in everything except scale. How did your time serving in this elite unit help shape the accomplished CEO that you are today?
Well, I'm glad you didn't ask me exactly what I did, because that,
No, I knew better than that. I knew better.
but how did it shape me? In absolute every way. I mean, I just imagine I came back after my military service and then went to UCLA. And so I was a couple of years older than many of the other students in my class, but in so many ways, I was trained on how to study quickly and how to analyze things quickly. And also the Army will mature you. And so you really gave me a huge jump start on many things. And I think just even, not even just Shmone Matayim, not only
Yeah.
8200, had a formative impact on me. I'm one of those, so I'm the opposite of typical Israelis. So most Israelis are Israelis that are born in Israel and then move to Los Angeles. In my case, it's the opposite. So I'm an American that was born in the United States, and I moved to Israel. And then I lived in Israel and got the gift of learning how to hustle and how to toughen up. And, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. And learn how to really just have this amazing outlook on life, on how to, just Israel is also about survival. There are limited resources in Israel, and so you grow up in that kind of country. It was such a gift for me growing up over there and serving in the military, of course. But I mean, just the whole experience of living in Israel. I'm so unbelievably grateful as an American to have. It's not just the military training; it's just the life training that I got from doing high school in Israel. Obviously, I'm able to read in Hebrew, but just the whole mentality of things are not going to be given to you on a silver platter, but that doesn't matter. You're still going to hustle and make your way to do it. And like, I'll walk into a room and I'll figure out how to become more efficient, how to turn the whole place into more efficient, because when you have limited resources, your brain ends up doing that. So
Great. That's
By
great.
the way, after we are off the air, I think somebody that I know served with you. Yeah, so we'll discuss that after.
We'll dish about that. Before I close out, we wouldn't be the Yentas that we are without asking you, what is the Prager work environment like? Is it like Donut Monday, lunch brought in on Friday for the employees? Tell us about your work environment there at PragerU, because everybody wants to work there.
The work, so I think we have incredible company culture. I call this team like the Navy SEALs of the digital world. People work incredibly hard here and incredibly well. Efficiency is something that I'm constantly walking around and seeing. Are we optimizing? We have limited resources. I mean, it may not sound limited. Our budget now is 30 million, so it may sound like a big budget, but considering what we are doing, shaping the way this country thinks about things, about ideas, it's actually not that much of a budget. And so with a limited budget, we just have to constantly be optimizing and thinking outside the box. So there's incredible energy here, lots of creativity, lots of young people. Believe it or not, I'm the geezer here, so you call me Yentas, and here so, but it's a lot of fun. It's really fun being part of the solution. We use the statement that Dennis Prager says all the time, which is every day you'll hear this: how do we do good for the world? How do we do good for the people? We're just about making people's lives better. And so when we think about what kind of content to put out there, we just think about, wow, if people just thought about this idea differently, or in this way or in that way, their lives will be better. Our society's lives would be better. Life will be better. So it's so fun knowing that you work in a place that is so focused on doing good, and that to me is an incredible opportunity.
Can you tell us a little bit about the ambassador? Because I know a lot of parents are watching and they want their kids involved. Some of them are involved with ACT-IL, with the ISC. Can you tell us a little bit about the young ambassador, the high school and college kids, and how can parents get their kids involved, or the Jewish schools to get the kids involved?
Sure. So we have a program called Prager Force. They can go to the website and just apply for it. There's a little bit of a vetting system. It's an amazing group. We have about 10,000 students right now. In some ways, they're like a sales force. I'll mention that there are many videos on our sites, millions of minutes on our site, and there are going to be minutes in there where people won't agree with every single word. However, if people agree general with a lot of it, they'll get a lot from being part of Prager Force, because it's a very non-monolithic group. People think about different, we have people who are pro-life, and then we have people who are pro-abortion. We have people who are very, very strong on Israel. And then we have people who are just kind of like unaware and not sure why Israel is even an issue. The big thing about it is that there's freedom of speech and respectful civil discourse and freedom of exchange of ideas. And it's an amazing support group. So if you're like that, if you believe in testing your intellectual boundaries, if you're a young person that believes that freedom of speech should exist, and you want to hear ideas that you would probably otherwise not hear on campus, whether high school or college, then joining Prager Force will rock your world. It will give you friends that you will never otherwise meet, because they are literally from around the world. We have Prager Force in Morocco, in Singapore, Argentina. It's incredible. And then imagine that fun opportunity that when you're traveling, getting together with these people from around the world or around the country, and just having exposure to people who are young individuals who are incredibly intellectual, who really love this country and care about ideas, and want to talk it through in a respectful manner. It's such a great program. I wish it existed when I was in college, because as I mentioned, I was more on the mature side, and I was craving something like that. And so I encourage people to just, go to the website, apply, and try to join. I think people will get a lot out of it. And again, if you're talking to your kids about it, if they see one video that they don't necessarily agree with, it doesn't matter. There'll be other videos that they do agree with. And that's the whole point of it.
Right. Thank you, Marissa. Well, I wanted to say what an honor it was for us to interview you on Yentas in the City today. You're an accomplished CEO and leader who helped transform PragerU, that currently has over 4 billion views, into the world's leading conservative nonprofit platform, which focuses on changing minds through the creative use of digital media. Taking full advantage of today's technology and social media, you educate millions of Americans and young people about the values that make America great. You have developed this high school college program, which has nearly 10,000 student ambassadors. What a great way to engage our new generation of Jewish leaders. We are so proud to have a leader of your caliber as a member of the tribe. And with that being said, we want to thank all of our followers for listening to this episode. Please remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Yentas in the City. You could also write to us at dearyentas@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you and answer your letters on our weekly advice column. We would like to thank our sponsors, Soft Smart Systems International and Conquest Realty Investments. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We have a lot more coming. This is Karen Cohen and Eti Elkis, and we are Yentas in the City. Stay safe.